Welcome to Lauren's House COVID Mental Wellness Check-In. I'm Monique Graves, and today we will be hearing from East Palo Alto, born and raised, Antwon Chatmon. Antwon loves to serve his community through his music, spoken word, and artistry, and works as an educator and mental health professional. After growing up in East Palo Alto and graduating from Pali in 2010, Antwon traveled to Southern California to obtain his bachelor's in psychology from Whittier College. During his summers in college, Antwon worked back home in East Palo Alto as a peer mentor for the Sponsor Employment Program, or SEP, through One East Palo Alto. After graduating from college in 2014, he moved back home to the Bay Area and continued to serve in several roles as a mental health clinician, mentor, and counselor. Antwon graduated with a master's degree in counseling psychology from Santa Clara University in 2019 and has continued serving as a mental health therapist for teens and young adults on juvenile probation through Santa Clara County. As an associate marriage and family therapist, speaker, musician, and spoken word artist, Antwon is passionate about connecting with, showing love, and uplifting others. The next voice you will hear will be that of Antwon Chatmon.
So, as she said, my name is Antwon Chatmon. I'm originally from East Palo Alto and graduated from Palo Alto High in 2010. Then I went to Whittier College, which is down in LA, and graduated from there in 2014. Then I took a couple of years off and then went to grad school, where I graduated from Santa Clara University with a master's in counseling psychology to be a marriage and family therapist. And I graduated from there in 2019. I've been a therapist now for almost 4 years. And a year before that, I was a drug and alcohol counselor. So I'm really excited to share with y'all, what I have to say about communication. And I hope that it's impactful for y'all and something that y'all could walk away from with something, special. So without further ado, I'll just jump in. I'll give you a brief overview of what I plan to cover today. First of all, just what is communication? Then we'll jump a little bit into verbal and nonverbal communication. And then we'll think about and look at how to identify your communication styles and a little bit about relationships. And then we'll get into toxic and unhealthy communication. And then on the other side, healthy communication and how to improve your communication. Then we'll look at finding people that you can communicate and open up with. And then we'll talk about the stigmas and how to work through them, different ways to express yourself. And lastly, I'll provide y'all with some resources for communicating and improving your communication. So first off, what is communication? Communication is just about having interaction where information is shared. One person may listen, one person may speak, both may listen at different times. So that's all communication is, just about expressing something or providing some information or sharing of information. One of the most common ways is the way that I'm communicating now, which is verbally, right? And so although there are a whole bunch of ways that we can communicate, verbal communication is probably one of the most common for most of us. And so with verbal communication, I just wanted to mention a couple of things that are important to keep in mind. First off, good communication takes courage. It also takes insight and reflection, and it also takes honesty and patience. And with those other things to keep in mind when we're communicating, if we want to make sure that we can communicate effectively, is cadence. So making sure that we're not speaking too fast or too slow for people to understand us. Voice tone is also important. So it's important to speak up, but also speak calmly, right? And so our message can be received by others. And then diction or word choice. And so what that means is just basically being mindful of the words that you use when expressing yourself to whoever you're expressing yourself to, making sure that you express yourself in a way that they can understand. So for example, if there's like different slang that you might use with your family or friends, if you're talking to a teacher, you may stay away from using that slang because they might not understand exactly what you're saying. On the other hand, there's nonverbal communication. And so nonverbal communication has to do with things like eye contact, as well as our facial expressions when we're talking and when we're listening. And then also just how our bodies move. As you can see, I'm using hand gestures and things like that. All of that is considered nonverbal communication. but it's usually paired with our verbal communication, and it can be a way of showing respect and a way of showing that we're engaged in what people are saying. And I can also instruct and kind of lead what we're saying and help add to what we're saying if we're using our hands and our bodies correctly. So an example I have, it's kind of a silly example, but I hope that y'all can grasp what I mean when we're thinking about using your word choice and body language and things like that. So for example, someone may approach you and be like, "Hey bro, those some nice shoes. Let me talk to you real quick," right? And so those gestures and those words could let off a different kind of meaning, or we can interpret that a certain way, versus if I was like, "Hey bro, nice to meet you, man. I really like your shoes. Do you mind if I take a little bit of your time to talk to you?" Right? Those two different ways, I might be trying to do the same thing in both ways, right? But we can definitely perceive what was said, or what is the intention behind what is being said, differently based off of those other things and what's being communicated. So just wanted to show that quick example of a difference of how to approach someone, or how somebody could approach you, and how you could take that. The next thing I'm jumping into is toxic communication. But before I really jump into that, I kind of want to do a quick experiential activity. And so for any of the viewers, whether you're watching this live or watching this, after it's recorded, I hope that y'all can kind of just join me in this. I'm going to kind of lead y'all through this activity and have y'all think about things and identify things for yourself. And we'll dive in a little bit more to define what's toxic and what's healthy. So if you have a significant other or anything near that, anybody that you're talking to kind of romantically or interested in, I want you to think about them in a way that y'all communicate. If you don't, that's okay too. Think of a close friend or a close family member and ask yourself these questions as I ask them out loud, and kind of reflect on it. So first question is, before talking to this person, how do you feel? And I'm just going to give you all a little bit of time to actually think about these things. So before approaching or talking to this person, how do you usually feel? And then the next question is, while talking to that person, how do you feel? And so I'm hoping that y'all can identify what it feels like before you want to talk to that person, and then during that, what kind of emotions come up. Do you feel happy? Do you feel calm? Do you feel angry? Do you feel scared, right? Those are some of the things that I want y'all to be thinking about. The next question I want y'all to think about and reflect on is, while talking to them, do you feel like you ever being attacked, or that they're being defensive? Or do you feel like they address you and listen to you respectfully, and that you're able to listen to them and address them respectfully as well? So continue to think about that with this specific person. Next, do you feel like the words and feelings that you express are understood and valued, or do you feel like they miss what you're trying to say oftentimes, or that you're misunderstood or ignored? Next question is, do you feel like you have to raise your voice or yell to be heard? Or do they often raise their voice or yell or get in your face when speaking? And then this next one has to do with that interaction as well. During those interactions, is there ever any negative or abusive name calling or words used when you talk to that person? And then in the case of there being a disagreement when talking to this person, do you ever feel like you come to a resolve, or you're able to get to the bottom of the disagreement and come to an agreement? Or do you feel like talking about your disagreement makes things worse? The next question I want you to ask yourself is, do I commonly have to bite my tongue or not share my feelings to avoid arguments or a conflict? Or am I able to share how I'm feeling when I'm feeling it without fear of there being an issue? And then the last question, just as part of this activity, is, how do you feel after talking to this person? Do you ever feel like you were supported? Do you ever feel like you were heard? Do you ever feel like worse off? Do you ever feel sad or feel hurt or down? Those are some of the things that I want y'all to think about. And we'll jump into the characteristics and patterns of toxic communication next. And, by identifying some of these things, I hope that y'all can recognize if you are, engaging in more unhealthy communication styles, or if people around you are doing that. So the first part about characteristics and patterns and signs of toxic communication is about lying or there being a lack of trust. So I understand that trust needs to be earned, built, and maintained. And then sometimes if that trust is broken, it needs to be rebuilt, right? And so I think that it's important, though, when we're communicating, for it to be healthy, for us to be able to have that trust. And if we recognize that we can't trust the other person, or the other person can't trust us, that might be a sign, right? I'm not diagnosing anything, but that might be a sign of maybe unhealthy communication styles. The next thing is jumping to conclusions. And so with jumping to conclusions, there's two things that could happen. The first one could be fortune telling. And so that basically is assuming that you know for sure what's going to happen, or kind of telling the future, right? Fortune telling. You're telling the future of what is going to happen between you and that person, or what that person is going to do. And so an example of that could be like, when I go on my business trip, I know you're going to hang out with those people that I don't want you hanging out with, right? And that could be a sign or a style and a pattern of unhealthy communication, because instead of asking that person, what their plans are, you're just coming to an assumption. And then as a result, you probably have negative feelings about that, right? The next one is mind reading. It's kind of similar, but different. And so that might be like coming up with the idea. You may say this to somebody: you didn't respond to my text because you don't care about my feelings and that I'm struggling, right? When in reality, they might have gotten into a car accident, right? Hopefully not. Or they might have been busy at work or handling something else, and that's why they weren't able to respond to the text. And so just having those conclusions that you're jumping to can cause tension and conflict within an interaction and can be unhealthy. The next one is being judgmental. And so being judgmental looks like having your mind made up as to what's right or wrong, and then using that and using words like should or should not could also be seen as judgmental as well, right? And so it's like, why did you do that? You know that was wrong, and you shouldn't have done that to me, without recognizing maybe what actually happened, or maybe that they didn't even mean to do it at all, right? And so that could put the other person down, or if somebody's using that towards you, that could put you down and make you feel some type of way as well. And so that's a sign of unhealthy communication. The next one is being critical or using criticism. And so this one has to do with like attacking someone's character or personality and like their personal traits, instead of really talking about the behavior as the issue. So an example, say your brother forgot to take out the trash, right? You being critical, you might say, you're hella lazy and inconsiderate. I can't believe you don't care about keeping the kitchen clean and smelling fresh, right? And so just by being critical, you're telling them that they're lazy, instead of saying, hey, I have a problem with you not taking out the trash. I know that you're busy. Can you please just take out the trash, right? And so being defensive is the next one. And now being defensive can definitely be a natural response to when we're feeling attacked. But the thing that I want to mention here about being defensive is when you're being defensive, kind of, I guess, like disregards other people's feelings or what they're experiencing with you. So an example of that could be, I didn't mean to, like if they say, oh, I needed you to do this, or, could you help me with this? And you're like, oh, I didn't mean to miss that, or, I didn't mean to do this or whatever. Or you could say something like, I wouldn't have done that if you wouldn't have done this, right? And so sometimes what gets missed is the meaning that they're trying to communicate, where it's like, hey, I just really wanted you to be there. But you kind of dismiss that by saying, well, if you didn't miss my graduation, I wouldn't have missed yours, type of thing, right? And so it kind of misses what's actually trying to be communicated. The next one is called ignoring. Another word for that is stonewalling. But basically that's usually a result of being overwhelmed with the interaction, or just feeling like you can't handle what's going on. And so oftentimes people will stop responding to the other person because they kind of shut down or just don't have that mental capacity or energy to keep talking to them, especially when there's an argument or something like that. Another example of this could be called silent treatment. Some of y'all may have heard that term as well. It's like, man, I'm trying to text my girl. She keep giving me silent treatment, bro. She ain't saying nothing at all, right? And so sometimes we're in situations where it's like that person not saying anything at all can be more hurtful than them telling the truth and saying how they actually feel, even if it's not really what we want to hear or how we want them to feel. So the next one is labeling. And this is kind of similar to name calling. So like labeling someone as selfish, calling someone a liar, calling someone lazy, as we did in that example before, or calling someone soft or emotional, right? And so labeling is really dangerous and can be really impactful in a negative way in relationships and in communication. So, if you want to have healthy communication, you want to try to stay away from labeling. And then other traits that are toxic, I just kind of have another part of the list. So mocking one another, like making fun of them or kind of parroting them and like using their tone or making fun of the way that they say things or do things, that could be unhealthy. Making fun or poking at someone's insecurities, right? A lot of times in relationships with people that we're close to, whether it's romantic or just friends, we know what are their insecurities. We know what some of their like weak spots are, right? And poking fun at that or making fun of that can be very unhealthy and toxic. The next one is blackmailing or threatening someone, right? We definitely don't want to have that kind of trait in our communication where I'm like, if you don't do this, I'm gonna do this to you, right? That's not healthy at all. Giving ultimatums is also something that's unhealthy, right? So it's like you either hang out with your friends or you spend time with me. And if you hang out with your friends, then we got to break up because I don't like that. Like that's a really tough position to put somebody in or for yourself to be put in, right? And that's really unhealthy as well. Obviously, cussing or using harsh language could be toxic, but that depends on the relationship. I know that when we talk to our friends, we talk differently to our friends than we do like our teachers or our mentors and other people in our life, right? And so sometimes as friends, we can kind of cuss and call each other names, but it's a very joking and cool way to do things based off the relationship. But just keep in mind that if the other person is actually feeling hurt by that, then that's when it becomes toxic or unhealthy. The next one is being too passive. So that might just be an example of that. It's like kind of just going with the flow, even when you don't really want to. So like somebody that you're riding in a car with, they like, and we'll make it stop here, here, and here. And you kind of just like, oh, okay. When in reality, right, you might have a show that you want to watch in 15 minutes and you really prefer them to go straight home. So being too passive can actually be toxic because then you can start to build up like resentment and anger towards that person instead of just speaking up and letting them know what you need to do or what you would like for them to do. And that can avoid that anger and resentment that you might build towards that person. The next one is being passive aggressive. So excuse my French, but like being a smart ass or being sarcastic, that's definitely not healthy ways to communicate, right? Maybe you leave room when you're saying stuff, you leave room for somebody to infer or to interpret what you're saying instead of just telling them explicitly what you actually mean. So an example of that could be like, man, only someone stupid wouldn't know what to get me for the store or to get me for my birthday. When they're kind of asking, hey, what do you want for your birthday? Or what should I get you from the store? That's kind of saying like, basically, if you don't know what to get me, you're stupid, right? And so that's very passive aggressive and definitely a toxic way to communicate. And then the last one, obviously, is aggressive communication. So disrespecting the dignity or the rights of somebody else by saying what's on your mind in a way that doesn't respect them. So like cussing someone out is an example of that, right? So with that, that's a long list. I know I gave you a lot of different things that can be considered toxic communication patterns or styles or traits. Now we're going to just flip it to healthy communication, right? And so when thinking about healthy communication, some things that I wanted to point out for y'all is being in tune with how you feel. I think that's one of the most important steps, to communicating healthily and in a good way. So being in tune with how you feel, also being honest, using a calm tone of voice and respectful words, as we mentioned before. Keep in mind your nonverbals, right? Make eye contact with that person. have an open kind of body language, right? You might want to face them when you're talking to them instead of like facing away from them, or having like your arms crossed and things like that. All of those things can kind of communicate other things that you don't maybe mean to communicate. And so when you want to have healthy communication, you want to make sure that everything is in alignment with what you're trying to communicate. I think it's also important to plan what you want to communicate and how you want to communicate it, right? So you might want to think about time, place, right? Who else is going to be around? All of those things are really good things to consider when you want to have healthy communication. The next one is just practicing patience, letting one person speak at a time, and really trying to listen to them and understand them. And the next part kind of goes into that, asking open-ended questions and seeking that understanding. So that's a really good skill to have and a really good trait. So you might ask who, what, how, all of those things in a non-judgmental tone. So you don't want to be like, man, how would you do that, right? That's kind of judgmental. I'm kind of already saying that I feel negatively about that, versus like, oh, what made you do that? Or how did you come to that decision, right? That's a lot more open and calm kind of a tone. Other questions you might ask is like, what would you like for me to do differently next time? Or what exactly do you mean by that, right? Those are questions open-ended. It's leaving room for them to fill in the blanks as to what you're asking them. And it shows that you're seeking that understanding. So now another communication trait that would be important and that's super healthy is assertiveness. And I think a lot of times people kind of don't understand what assertiveness really means. In this case, it's about saying what's on your mind and how you feel in a respectful way, and kind of like standing your ground instead of being like passive or passive aggressive, as we looked at some of those other ones, right? So assertiveness isn't about being aggressive. It's just about actually standing up and speaking up when you have something to say. And so an example of that could be like, hey, yo, I don't want to be out late tonight, so that I can have time to hit the gym before it closes. Is it cool if you have me home by 8 o'clock, right? Instead of just letting them maybe go with their plans and staying out later, or hanging out with more friends and staying out later. Another example of being assertive is learning to say no. And I think this one is really important. A lot of us are, really giving people, we care about people. And so it could be hard for us to say no when they're asking something from us or asking for our energy and time. But it's important for us to be assertive because it'll help protect us from having more toxic traits, and having anger or resentment towards this person because maybe I needed to study for a test, but I said yes to taking them to the airport, which impacted my ability to study for the test, right? And so an example of that could be like, no, I actually don't have the time to take you, man. I hope that you can find another ride. I statements is another way to practice healthy communication. So instead of starting a sentence with you, like instead of saying like, you did this to me and that made me mad, it can kind of come from a, hey, I feel angry when I feel like I'm not being heard, or when you turn your back while I'm talking to you, right? So that's an I statement. It's like you're taking the responsibility on yourself. You're not pointing the finger at them, but you're also expressing how you feel. Another example that I wrote down here is I feel hurt when people assume that I don't care, right? And so that's expressing that, hey, don't assume that I don't care because that hurts me. Rephrasing is also an important skill and thing to practice. So instead of calling someone unorganized, you might say, hey, look, I appreciate how you just go with the flow, right? That's a more positive way of saying that maybe they don't have as much structure, but it's not always a bad thing, right? Also, apologizing when mistakes are made, and we'll look at that a little bit later in one of the resources that I'll share with y'all. But apologizing when mistakes are made or when there's a misunderstanding, right? Taking that responsibility and accountability upon yourself and saying, hey, look, that my bad, I didn't mean to do that. That's a very healthy trait when it comes to communication. The next one and second to last one that I have here is starting with positives and showing that appreciation before identifying the issue, right? And so instead of just like calling like a sibling that did something wrong, or calling a coworker or a friend that did something wrong, and then just starting off with like, bro, like you did this, it might be more helpful to be like, hey, yo, how's your day, man? How you doing today? All right, do you have a little bit of time for us to chat? I just wanted to express something to you. And then that can be received in a lot better way versus just coming at them with the issue. And then the last one is avoiding, obviously, the long list of toxic traits that we talked about before. And I have all of these written down on a doc. I could definitely share this at a later time so that y'all have access to this as well. So yeah, definitely trying to avoid any of those toxic traits that we identified earlier. So the next part that I think is important to cover when thinking about communication is really having someone to communicate with, right? Finding somebody that you can practice all these healthy things, these healthy traits with, being able to be honest and be assertive and have the same from them as well, I think is really important. And so kind of just want to share some examples of people who may be helpful, or people that you might be able to communicate healthily with. So definitely family. I'm hoping that y'all have family members, and friends that you can connect with and communicate in a healthy way. Mentors is also a resource and somebody that you could connect with. Coaches, teachers, pastors, any other community members, and then also lastly, counselors and therapists, right? And so, I mean, obviously, I'm a therapist. I might have a little bit of a bias as to that. And we'll talk about some of the attitudes and things that I know are common as well when it comes to talking to a counselor or therapist. But with all of this said, I just want to say it's important for us to really have, especially as Black men or men of color, to have somebody that we could talk to, somebody that we could trust, and somebody that we could receive any type of support from, even if it's just a space to vent or a space to get advice or whatever it is that we may need. I definitely know how important that is for us and our health. And so, I mean, I just want to share a little bit about why I became a therapist. I definitely became a therapist because I feel like I could connect to other people that look like me and that come from where I come from. And I want to give, people opportunity to have somebody that kind of represents them, be the person that they go to versus somebody that doesn't know them at all, can't understand them, doesn't understand their struggles and things like that. And so that was the real reason that I became a therapist, aside from just naturally being somebody that loved talking to people and supporting people. I think I kind of naturally had that gift. So I took my gift and my passion and I made it, my career. And so I just wanted to share a little bit about why I became a therapist. Next to that, I do want to share a little bit about myself. I do have support groups with other Black men, and then I have other friend groups that aren't just, Black men. But it's important to have support groups and people that you can connect with and have those type of relationships. So for me, the fellas, they give me a space where I can be honest, where I can share my struggles and I can share my wins as well. And thankfully, they actually listen, they support me, they don't put me down, they don't make me feel bad about what I'm struggling with or what I've struggled with, and what I'm dealing with currently. And then also, they also challenge me. They push me to be better. We talk about goals and we hold each other accountable to meeting those goals. And if those goals change, then we support each other with that as well. And so I just want to share that as an encouragement for y'all. I definitely think it's important to have healthy people around you that you can connect with and not feel judged by and talk to. Next, I also think it could be helpful for us to talk about the stigmas and the barriers, and things that could get in the way of us wanting to have somebody to talk to. And in this part, I'll specifically talk about like therapy and counseling, because obviously being a Black male and being part of the Black community, I know some of the attitudes and things that come up. Some of the things that were told to me, even some of the things that I learned growing up, and that I might even struggle with actually right now still, as far as getting help or wanting to get help. And so definitely understand that there may be some barriers and things in the way. The first one I want to talk about is cultural mistrust. So just in our culture, right, there's that feeling that, these therapists have bad intentions, these counselors have bad intentions. Maybe the clinician doesn't care at all, right, really about us. They just have us coming in and they make money off of us, but they don't really care about our problems. They don't care about helping us solve them or working through them. There's also a notion that we might be misdiagnosed, and that's either overdiagnosed or underdiagnosed, right? And so maybe they don't diagnose us with exactly what's going on, and so we don't really get the treatment that we need. Or maybe they tell us, like, you're this and that, and you got all these issues going on, when really it's just maybe one specific thing. As I kind of mentioned before, right, the cost is not worth the benefit. So there might be that fear of like, man, I'm spending all this money and then I'm not even getting nothing out of it, right? or fear that they might be manipulating you or sharing things that are supposed to be confidential, or maybe by sharing things and letting out my secrets, that might backfire on me and be negative, might negatively impact me, right? And so those are some of the attitudes as well. And then I'm aware of the fact that historically, a lot of times as Black people, we've been forced into treatment and we haven't had that option to actually choose, whether that be from like the legal system saying that, hey, you need to go do this, or times before when they almost used to use us kind of as lab rats, right? To like try different things on us and see how it works. And I'm sure that y'all have heard of movies and seen movies that may have kind of depicted some of that stuff, right? The next one is just this notion of, I'm not crazy, why would I go to a therapist? And so it's just that notion of feeling like only crazy people go see therapists, which, definitely isn't true, but it's something that we sometimes believe. And then the next part is just about kind of feeling like if I have to go see a therapist, or if I choose to go see a therapist, that I'm weak and I can't handle things on my own, mentally, spiritually, right? Or my family doesn't support me enough, right? A lot of people, almost there's shame in their family, like, oh, why wasn't his mom or dad or grandma there for him, to where now he got to go to this other person and talk to them, right? And so there's definitely that notion of that. And then the next part is about like a fear of unpacking some of the things that we've been through. And so I hope that y'all know what trauma is, but basically it's just any experience that could impact us and have kind of some kind of impact on our psychology, on our mind, on our mental health. Whether that means that it makes us scared of something, it makes us angry about something, it makes us sad about something, or maybe it can make us numb towards certain things. And so sometimes there's a fear of like going back to that trauma, because it's like, you know what, I experienced that, but we all kind of experience stuff like that. Let me just move forward and not go back and look at it or talk about it. Then there's still that notion that we'll be misunderstood by the counselor, right? They won't be able to relate. I may have mentioned that before. And then I think there's also some misinformation about the role and the process of seeing a counselor or therapist, right? Like, oh, if I go over there, they're gonna tell me I'm crazy and they're gonna give me medicine, or they're gonna send me to rehab and take me away from my family. And so I think sometimes there's some misinformation about the role and the process of that as well. And then next is the fact that in our culture, there may be more accepted ways of coping, right? Within our community, there might be more accepted ways of coping, whether that be through sports, through using music like rapping and stuff like that to get those things out or seek that healing. Definitely there's, an acceptance of using drugs or alcohol, right? Maybe there's an acceptance of fighting. If you're mad, take it out on somebody else. Maybe there's that notion of like, hey, man, just distract yourself, like maybe go to work more or do more with school, or find something else that keeps your mind off of those things that you're struggling with. And so all of those things can kind of steer us away from maybe seeking the help that we would like to have, or getting the space that we would like to have, or maybe even feel we need. So in contrast to that, I want to talk about some motivators for seeking help, despite those feelings and cultural beliefs. And so the first one is, I think that just by gaining insight, you can learn more about yourself, you can learn more about your family. And I think that enables you to break any cycles that you see that need to be broken, and can help you and your family have some healing based off of some of those cycles that may have been unhealthy or may have been harmful. And then it can help you develop new patterns and ways of thinking, commuting, and behaving. And those are things that you could pass down to the younger generations, or even to like your younger siblings and things like that, right? It can give you a way to grow in a direction that you'd like to grow, and potentially grow out of and away from the things that you don't want to be a part of anymore. And so the next one is, you can definitely be directed to other people and resources and find a sense of community. And so sometimes if you come to a counselor or a therapist or somebody in the helping profession, they can help you connect to others so that you don't feel alone with your struggles or feel alone with your pain. I think sometimes there's things that we experience and maybe we see other people respond. Maybe there'll be something I experienced with somebody else, but they respond differently than I do. And I feel like, oh, maybe it didn't affect them like it's affecting me, right? And so as a result, I might feel more alone with my experience. And that can cause me to kind of just isolate and and not feel like I can share anything with anybody because they won't understand it. Like he experienced the same thing, but he was able to go do everything else that he wanted to do unfazed, seemingly, right? But for me, it's, kind of messed me up. And so I think when you go to a professional, they could direct you to other people that might have shared experiences and shared responses as well, and help you not feel alone with that, so that you could actually get the healing that you want to get. Aside from that, it's a space where you can get understanding and clarity. That person, their job is to understand you and to help you understand yourself as well, and build clarity so that you can move forward. And always, like if you go to a counselor or go to a therapist, you have the right to change that person. If you feel like you're not clicking with that person, you got the right to be like, hey, this isn't working for me. Do you know of anybody else that might be a better fit? Or you can, on yourself, just go look and see if there's somebody else that might be a better fit. The next part is the field is changing. Like, so, me as a therapist, there's a lot of other Black male therapists that I'm actually connected to and really close friends with. There's a lot of other people of color, women and men, that are in the field. And so it's not like it used to be maybe 30 or 40 years ago, where it's predominantly old white males. The field is definitely changing as far as the helping field. And so there's somebody that might be exactly from where you're from, or may have some of the experiences that you've had, or at least been exposed to that a lot, to where they can understand you and connect with you in a way that will help you move forward. And then the same thing, if we can see mental health the same as we see dental or physical health, right? So like if our tooth hurts, none of us trip about like, oh, I'm gonna look weak if I go to the dentist, right? Or if we broke our leg, none of us trip about going to the ER saying, oh, I'm gonna look weak, or I'm gonna be stupid, or I'm gonna look crazy if I go to the ER. And so my encouragement, I guess, is for us to kind of set the same viewpoint on our mental health and our psychological well-being as we do with everything else, right? If you need help, you go get the help, right? If you need a plumber, you call a plumber if you can't do it yourself, right? And so the same way we do those things, I want us to kind of view our mental health the same way and say, hey, if I'm struggling with this and it's not working, like the things I'm trying by myself ain't working, maybe I can reach out to anybody and get support to help me improve myself. And then, so this last part, sorry, just keep an eye on time. This last part is about, well, second to last part, creative ways to communicate. And so music is definitely something that you could do, whether it's playing music, listening to music, writing music, creating beats, or just singing along to songs. Those are all ways that you can kind of express yourself. And then also, if you're intentional about it, it could be a way for you to actually effectively communicate with somebody else if you feel like you can't find the words or the space or the courage to actually like be assertive and talk to them in a way that they can understand you. And so, for example, it's like, it might be like, hey, mom, I want you to listen to this song. And then as a result, y'all listen to the song, and then you can talk about it, and you can talk about what part you relate to, or maybe she can talk about what part she got from that and what you relate to, and y'all can connect in that kind of way. Also, another form of communicating is writing, right? And so writing notes, writing letters to people, writing poems, or sending texts and emails, right? Like those things we do all the time. And that's another way that you can communicate. Now, of course, there's different attitudes about like, oh, maybe I shouldn't apologize by writing it. Maybe I should meet this person in person and tell them face to face. And if I can't do that, then at least give them a phone call, right? There's different like attitudes and beliefs about that, of course. So I want y'all to keep that in mind. But writing, somebody a note could be a good way to communicate if you feel like you can't do it a different way. And then the next part is the social media, right? So making videos where you talk about your feelings kind of more generally and post it, to everybody, for everybody to see. That could just be a way of releasing some of those things, right? And then like right now, TikTok is big. So doing TikToks, I know there's those little TikToks where the words pop up, or, you have like little memes where you have like nobody, and then you have that situation, and then you talk about me, right? And you share like your experiences with those kind of specific situations, or how you feel with those specific situations. Those all could be creative ways. And then the next part is just like resharing, reposting posts that capture some of your feelings, right? So whether it's from somebody, famous that, has a big following, and they kind of share like their thoughts and ideas. And if you agree with that, you can reshare that, right? That's a way of expressing yourself as well. And then the next part is just some resources I'm not sure if I could share my screen on here. It looks like I can. Share screen. Let's see. Okay. I'm going to share my screen real quick just to show y'all some of these resources. And I'm not on my computer, so I hope that these links work. Cool. So this is a worksheet from Therapist Aid on assertive communication. And so as you can see, it just has a list and talks about some of the traits of assertive communication. And then it gives you some tips and then gives you some examples. And then down here, you can actually practice. So it gives you kind of situations and ways to be assertive in that response. And so I'm going to definitely send a link to this, and I hope that everybody watching this can have access to it, or that this could be part of the post after this is recorded. But I'll definitely share a link to this. The next one is about apologizing, which I mentioned, right, is definitely healthy. Being able to apologize and reflect on your actions and take that responsibility. And so you can see here, it talks about reflecting on your actions and then taking that responsibility. And then next part, it says listening and improving, right? And it breaks down some myths and reality, right? So one myth might be that love means never having to say you're sorry. In reality, apologies can be particularly important. When you love someone, an apology communicates you care about the other person and want them to feel better, right? Just a couple more. I'm keeping my eye on time. Active listening. I think this one is really important as well. So this is a way to show that you're listening and that you're actually trying to hold a space where the other person can communicate effectively with you and honestly with you, right? And so it breaks down what active listening is, ways to show that you're listening, and ways to encourage that sharing, right? And so here you can kind of see some of those open-ended questions that I had mentioned as well, right? That helps the conversation continue to go in a way that's usually fruitful and helpful. And then here it says striving to understand, right? So making sure you're present and making sure you have an open mind. So not being judgmental, not fortune telling, not doing any of those toxic things, and really just saying, hey, let me just listen to this person and take what they're giving me and move from there. Another one that I want to show you real quick, I statements. I had mentioned this before as well, right? And so I statements help you stay away from attacking the other person and blaming, right? So it's like, you can't keep coming home so late. It's so inconsiderate. The I statement could say, I feel worried when you come home late. I can't even sleep, right? And so that's a different way to express that same meaning and the thing that you want to express in a way that can actually hopefully be received a lot better from the other person that you're communicating with. And then I have a link to all of these different links. And then 4 Horsemen is actually about toxic ways to communicate, but it just breaks down each kind of toxic one and hopefully can help you understand if you realize that you are doing some things that could be toxic. It can help you kind of break away from those things. So that's pretty much it for what I have. I definitely am interested in any questions that y'all have, and I hope that I can answer all of them. But I will stop sharing. And yeah, feel free to send them. I have the comment section up, or if anyone can jump on that they see any questions or hear any questions, please feel free to share. I don't feel heard when I talk. Yeah, so I mean, that could be a sign that the other person isn't providing you with a space where they actually are showing you that they listen, right? And so some of the things that we went through as far as like asking open-ended questions and practicing that patience, it sounds like maybe the other person isn't able to do that. And maybe a way around that could just be about maybe hearing what they have to say first. I think oftentimes when people have something that they really want to express, they might talk over you, or they might not even listen to anything you're saying because they're just getting everything ready that they want to say. And so a way around that could be that, hey, when we're talking, I'm gonna let you go first, and I'm gonna listen to you, and I'm gonna reflect things back to you that you share with me so that you could feel heard. And then hopefully that can help them actually be in a space where they can listen to you and can give you that space where you can actually feel heard and understood.
I got a question on communication, and I have 2 questions. One's on communication,
Sure.
and one's on patience.
Right.
One, in terms of like communication, like what's the best like ways to be able to communicate? Because like for instance, like
Mhm.
when it's me and like I'll just say if it could be me and my mom.
Right.
Me sometimes like I like to listen, like I'm a okay listener.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to my mom, she might not all the time she's comfortable in communicating. So
Mm.
not necessarily for me, but what's some ways for her to
Right.
learn to
Yeah, and so I mean, some of the things that I mentioned, you could kind of offer to that person, right? It was like, hey, I noticed when we talking, you don't really share that much. Maybe it might be helpful if you write it, or maybe we should give each other some space so that you can kind of collect your thoughts, right? I think sometimes when we're having interactions, people feel pressured and don't want to say the wrong thing or come out a certain way, and so as a result, they might just like stay quiet or shut down. And so it could be like, hey, I really want to talk to you about this, but I understand that you might not be ready. Maybe we should take some time, or maybe you could write it down, or maybe you can, find another way that helps you express that in a way that I can understand it. And I'm ready to hear that from you. I'd like to hear that from you when you're ready, right? And so that kind of goes into that patience piece, but I know you had a question kind of related to that as well.
yeah, my other question was patience, and it's like
Mm-hmm.
because it's another thing like for in a sense of like communication,
Right.
you don't have that patience, it's automatically going to turn into an argument.
For sure.
So
Yeah.
it's like, what are some like skills to develop or things to
To
develop?
develop that patience.
Yeah.
That's a good question, honestly. I think one thing that could help is having things that you want to communicate listed or written down already and prepared, so that, because I think sometimes people jump in because they don't want to miss their argument, right, or miss their point that they're trying to make. And so if I got everything listed, though, now it don't matter how quick or slow everything happens, I know I can still get to everything I want to get to, right? And so that might help somebody be more patient. I think also just trying to connect and recognize, hey, every time that I'm not patient, neither one of us feel understood, neither one of us come to a resolve, right? And so just recognizing, is this really helpful, right? And then if you can recognize that, then you say, all right, well, let me try something different, right? And then that might also help encourage or influence you to practice some more patience. Yeah, good question, sir.
When they tell their mom or their parent no, they think it's disrespect. Their parents
Ooh,
disrespect.
yeah. I mean, I don't want to say one way to do this or one way not to do this, right? Because each of us is gonna have a different perception, right? And everybody's parents is different. Um, yeah, that's a tough one. And trying to have boundaries with parents can also be seen as disrespectful, right? Because sometimes our parents come from a perspective of, you my kid and you're supposed to listen to me and you're supposed to drop everything when I say so, right? Which is, I understand, right? Especially coming from where I come from, my parents was like, they always said, because I said so. And they didn't give a lot of elaboration or explanation until they realized that it was actually more helpful to do that, right? And so thankfully, my parents actually came around to it as I got older as a teen and went off to college. But it could be really hard to have like healthy boundaries and try to practice healthy communication when there's that power dynamic and that difference with that authority. I think it could be a way around. I'm trying to think of a way that could help with that, though. Is a disrespect coming from me, coming from the parent feeling like I'm disobeying them by saying no, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if there's a way around that where it's like, hey, like literally right now I'm studying, mom. Like, I know you want me to do this, right? But it's like, I also need to study. Is it a way that, go ahead.
They need you to explain why you can't do it instead of just saying no.
Right. Instead of just saying no. And so, I mean, unfortunately or fortunately, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. That might be something that is important to also add. You don't want to just say no. No, mom, I'm not doing that. But it's more so, no, mom, I don't think I can do that at the time that you want me to because I'm going to be here doing this. Or, hey, maybe mom, you can let me know in advance. That way I can do that before I take off and be out with my friends, right? Or before I go study. Now everybody's needs can get met, right? You want me to take out the chicken so you can make it when you come home? Cool. But don't tell me that at 3 o'clock. Right, don't tell me that at 3 o'clock when you know I got class at 3 o'clock, right? And so there's just that way of like problem solving and saying, hey, what's the issue that you're really having with me? And then let's find out a way to work around that. And yeah, but that's a good one. That's a real good one.
That is. That is a good one. Sometimes I feel like the best way of communication or the best way of like having your parents to like listen to you
Mm-hmm.
is going to
Mm-hmm.
college, is being away from them for a minute so they can
Oh,
really get
yeah.
to understand that it's like, okay, like
Yeah.
here.
Nah, that was my brother and I. So some of y'all that might have tuned in the week before, right? Y'all saw my twin brother. Y'all recognize that we look alike. Yeah, that's my twin brother. We do the same type of work as well. But both of us going off and going to LA was like, it's just huge as far as transforming our relationship and improving our relationship with our parents. Because we came back and we had learned stuff and we like, hey mom, right, in a respectful way, hey mom and dad, this is some of the stuff we learning and this is some of the stuff we recognize as healthy and some of the things we recognize that might not be as healthy, right? You don't want to just call somebody toxic, right? Because that's kind of judgmental as well. But it's like, hey, I think there's a better way we could do this, right? And by doing that, we was able to come through a lot of like, there's a lot of breakthrough, there's a lot of insight, there was a lot of responsibility taken on both of our ends, and our relationship definitely got tighter. And it's cool because we were adults. So I think for one thing, when it comes to like that assertiveness and that courage, we have that more because we recognize we adults now. So I feel more comfortable coming up to my dad and telling him how I actually feel. But I think the earlier we can practice those things, right, and the earlier those things are received, then obviously the better.
Right.
Yeah.
They had one more.
Mm-hmm.
He said, when I get angry, I call people names. And I guess what they want to know is,
yeah,
I guess that's the patience that you need to build.
That's part of it, yeah. And then try to recognize where the anger is coming from, right? Is it because maybe you feel hurt or misunderstood, right? And so now I'm gonna bring you down. I think that's pretty common, right? And that's probably why arguments start a lot of times because neither one person is feeling hurt. So now it's just like, I'm just gonna one up you every time, right? And we both engage into something that's not really that helpful or that healthy. But recognizing where's that anger coming from, and then trying to find a way to communicate that, right? Kind of like what we said, like you don't want to call somebody a name or talk about somebody's character, more so talk about the issue, right? Like you like that the issue with like you not taking out the trash. I don't want to just call you lazy or say you a bum, right? The issue wasn't that. The issue was really, hey, I felt like you weren't being considerate by not taking out the trash when I asked you to take out the trash, right? And so trying to, like you said, also be patient, slow yourself down. There's one thing that can help with that 3-second rule. 3 seconds, some people that have more, more of a struggle handling their anger and not reacting might do 5 or 7 seconds. And so what that means is when somebody speaks to me, in my head I go 1, 2, 3. And as a result, now I'm not just reacting to what they're saying, but I'm actually giving myself time to think about what they're saying and think about what I want to say back that will hopefully be more helpful or healthy. And so I usually teach that to my clients as well, like that 3-second rule or 5-second rule, or like I said, 7 or 9-second rule, depending on right how many thoughts is going through your head and how fast you want to react to it. And I think that also slows things down overall in the communication. And can help people stay a little bit calmer as well.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That 5-second rule, that actually probably would help on like, letting you be able to breathe and keep your composure, get your composure.
Exactly. Let me collect my thoughts. Let me calm myself down. What they said kind of triggered me or made me mad, right? But let me give them the benefit of the doubt that they're not really trying to attack me, right? And then say, okay, so reflecting back. So what I'm hearing you say is that you had a problem with this and this. Is that right? Okay. And then now let me say my response. All right. So one thing that I think we could do about that is this, or how I feel about that is this and this, right? It's easier said than done for sure, but when you practice it, you get better at it. Just like with anything else, the more you practice it, the better you get. And it models also for the person you're talking to a more healthy way and pattern of talking, right? And so they might get agitated at first, like, why are you taking so long to answer me? I'm sitting there talking to you, right? And then you can explain that, look, I'm actually trying to gather my thoughts and make sure I'm not responding to you in a way that's hurtful or unhelpful or unhealthy, right? And then it can kind of show that example for them. But whoever mentioned that, thank you for being honest about that and being vulnerable. And I hope that those things can help.
yeah, this is my last one. In terms of like writing stuff down, how effective
Mhm.
would that be in terms of like learning how to communicate and having patience and stuff like that?
I think writing stuff down, it gives you the opportunity to be with your thoughts and with your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And like when you write, you can cross things out, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can, if you, I type a lot because my handwriting isn't the best. So I actually type a lot. For one, it's faster. Like I'm so used to texting, it's so much faster or typing on my computer. But it gives you the space to like process what you're feeling, to think about how you want to say it, right? Versus like how we're talking right now, right? Like I have less time to do that. You know what I mean?
Right.
But if I'm writing it, I can really take my time and think about, okay, because once I say something to you, I can't really take that back. I could apologize for it, but I can't take it back. But if I write something down, and sometimes it's helpful, like I tell my clients, write all the negative stuff you want to say about this person or to this person. Write it all out. Once you're done with it, throw it away. And then write what you actually want to communicate in a healthy way to that person. So now I was able to get all my anger and all the feelings out that I know probably wouldn't be helpful for me to actually tell this person, but at least I got it off my chest. And now, okay, how can I express what I said in that first part in a way that's actually going to help us get to a resolve or help us continue to have healthy communication? Yeah. So I definitely think it helps with that. And it's a good practice. It's a good thing that helps you with that. And then as a result, your brain gets used to that process of, oh, I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to say it that way. I'm going to say it this way. Right. And so then as a result, when it comes to talking in person, you actually get faster and better at doing that in a way that's actually helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Good question. So thank you.
That was my last one.
All right. That's fine.
Antwon, that was beyond words. I really love the worksheets that you left in the comment box that kids can begin to start using I statements and to use I statements with family and friends. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Next week, we will be talking about coping skills. See you next week.